So with update 10.8 coming out this week, we're actually getting a change to the Missouri. Most of you know by now that the Missouri has a combat mission if you already had the ship before they wanted to reintroduce it, and this was to give you back the credits that they took away so that they could resell it again. And it was only 17%, and turns out that's not quite enough. And they buffed it up to 20% and a little 3% increase, but apparently that's not enough. And now we're at 30%. That's a pretty drastic change, and hopefully that's going to do it. In this game, you're going to see that I have basically everything I can have to increase my credit earnings, and we'll just see how many credits we earn off of, I believe this is around a 2,000 base XP game, maybe a little bit less than that. So if this patch would go through, I'd get what, 10% extra credits? Well, not quite, because the combat mission is not counted towards when we run all these credits and flag earning things, right? So it's a really weird problem. I'm not sure why Wargaming decided to do it like this, but it seems like a weird issue for them to have since they have all of the code in the back end, and they could really easily see the equation for credit earnings and just give us whatever we were intended to get beforehand. I really don't understand why this is such a massive complication, but regardless, it seems like they're going to be fixing it next patch. So that's a really nice change, as well as giving you back some of the credits you would have earned had this change gone through last patch. So if you played a bunch of Missouri, you're probably going to get a bunch of credits at the end of, what, September 12th, I believe is what they said, something like that. So that'll be a really nice change, and hopefully that'll be enough to at least give us back the credit earnings that we bought the ship for, right? But if you're wondering about the ship itself in the current year, it's not bad, honestly. The radar is not all that useful, I find, but it's a nice little threat to deter destroyers from coming close to you, coming after you, that kind of thing. And it can really help late game to deal with DDs who are just staying in stealth and torping you, right? It is only a 9.5 kilometer radar, sorry. It does last reasonably long, but I mean, it's pretty easy for people to avoid it since you're so big and easy to spot, right? It's around 12.5-ish concealment. With this build, I'm actually getting only 14 kilometers of concealment, so pretty easy to stay outside the radar range, but there are definitely scenarios where it's useful. I personally, though, value the healing on the Iowa pretty highly. There's a lot of HE spam, there's a lot of damage that comes in that you want to be able to heal, and Missouri not getting that buff where Iowa does to that super, not a super heal, but a mini super heal that the Tech Tree American battleships get at tier 8, 9, and 10. Only on the North Carolina line though, right? So you don't get that on the Vermont, Kansas, or the Minnesota. So it is a line exclusive thing, I guess, which is interesting, but it seems like Missouri was based on Iowa, and it would have been nice to see that buff get to the Missouri as well. Although it doesn't really seem like they're going to do that, and I guess the radar is good enough as a balancing mechanic. I personally just don't find myself using the radar all that often. Maybe that's because my playstyle doesn't lend itself to using that radar all the time. I'm trying to play a little bit safer these days in my battleships, and I find that if you're in a position to make use of your radar, most of the time you've overextended. I think that is pretty common these days, right? If you're within 9.5 kilometers of enemy destroyers or a smoke screen where you can make use of your radar, you're probably overextended and about to die. And that's where I only use it defensively or I use it late game, that kind of thing. Rarely are there islands that actually are close enough to the cap and safe enough that I can push up and use them. We did get very lucky there, as you saw the Pommard getting a shot into our flat broadside and doing essentially no damage. That's of course because this ship has a lowered citadel. When they did change the American battleships, the Missouri did get that change at least, so you don't have a gigantic above water citadel anymore. And while that is nice when you're playing the Missouri, it's really unfortunate when you find one broadside and you want to slap it really hard, right? If I was at Pommern, I would have been pretty mad. It was always so fun to find yourself a broadside Iowa or Missouri and hit it for 60k HP, right? That was a pretty common thing back in the day, and I'm a little sad that that's gone. Even though it saved my life right there, I do wish we had more raised citadels to actually more consistently hit. Because people just tend to sail broadside. They don't actually learn that sailing broadside is wrong. Like this North Carolina. He's just sailing broadside, and, I mean, depending on our RNG, something might happen, something might not, right? We do get a good hit this time, but if you're not given consistent feedback, how are you ever going to learn the game, right? If you're consistently shown that when you go broadside, your ship explodes, well, hopefully you're going to learn. Most people would learn by that. But given the way this game is these days and how RNG just plays into everything, as that North Carolina gets around 16k into our superstructure that's angled, yeah, it's seemingly very difficult to learn this game, not only because there's just so many gimmicks and mechanics, but because the game doesn't give you consistent feedback. Speaking of consistent feedback, there goes that Nagata with a triple citadel. Right, that is my RNG used up for today, or whenever I played this, right? I did not play it today, but those salvos are very rare. And even though I am running full dispersion, as much as I possibly can, you do get these wonky, weird salvos most of the time. It's pretty rare to get that kind of dispersion on a broadside ship at those ranges. That's more like it, right? 3 hits into a Pommern at 13 kilometers. That's really what you can expect. I was always a little bit disappointed in the Missouri and the Iowa coming from the North Carolina. The shell velocity is really nice to have, and of course the extra dispersion module is really nice to put on your ship, but the North Carolina gets that 2.0 Sigma, and the way the dispersion is calculated in this game, slower shells actually get better dispersion, just the way the ellipse is drawn on the water. So North Carolina always felt more accurate to me than the Missouri or the Iowa ever did, and it felt almost like a downgrade in guns most of the time. So that's why I haven't really played a lot of these ships. Of course, once you get up to the Montana, you get the volume of shells to make up for that, and it does feel like a much stronger ship than North Carolina, obviously. But I do really enjoy those NC salvos, right, where you get those juicy hits. And sometimes Missouri gets those, sometimes Iowa gets those, but not as consistently in my opinion. But that doesn't mean the ship is bad. It's really good still. I don't think that you'd be disappointed if you decided to gamble for this thing, or if you managed to complete the online campaign and then trade a bunch of doubloons for it. It's still a really good ship in today's game, but you do have to play it a little bit more cautiously and not just full send it in to make use of that radar. I think the radar is a bit of a trap in that way, where it tempts you to push in a little bit too far and then you die pretty quickly, since you don't have that extra healing or the fast heals like a Georgia might. I was using my radar to make sure the DDs were not within 9.5 kilometers of me as I slowed down to hopefully deal with that Pommern. You can see I'm actually running a secondary build in this one, trying to combine that with the radar and maybe get a little extra chip damage on DDs, but we overstay our welcome a little bit, and of course the Pan-European DDs have some insanely fast torpedoes. They do manage to catch us, so not a huge deal though, since flooding has been changed. Back in the day I probably would have died, considering flooding did more damage per tick and it lasted even longer. Floodings were a death sentence, and that is a nice change for battleships and everyone who ends up taking a flooding these days, not to just instantly die from one single damage control usage. But the Missouri seems to be in a pretty good spot to me. Overall, it's not a bad ship at all, and Tier 9 really is the best tier to play. If you're trying to play a lot of games, you're generally going to be top tier, and most of the time you're actually not going to be facing an aircraft carrier, which can result in better games. And the more good games you have, higher base XP, the more credits you're going to earn overall. So if you have a Missouri, definitely use it if you're short on credits, as I believe most of us are. We're going to take a look at my credits when we go to port here. You might be a little bit surprised how low I am on credits, considering just 6 months ago or so I had over 200 million credits, and I'm basically on fumes at this point. All thanks to the signals change that you no longer get flags from your achievements in-game, which is a really, really sad change and puts even more emphasis on running premium ships and earning credits even more. It is a pay-to-win advantage, right? You do get 5 to 10, sometimes 15% better performance out of your ship just by having a few flags equipped, which is kind of sad in my opinion. It used to be a nice little free-to-play thing where if you were good at the game and got a lot of these awards, and you would just earn the signals that you've used in-game anyway. It was really nice, but I think we all are upset about that. I don't have to go on and on about that, but having some tier 9 premiums to run and earn some credits in might just help to mitigate some of that extra income loss for spending a couple million credits every so often just to get the right flags for your ship. In fact, I've actually stopped using a lot of the flags and signals that I would have in the past. On battleships, I've gotten it down to a fire flag and a heal flag, and if it's a secondary battleship, I'll run the secondary flag. That's it. I run 3 flags now, where I used to run probably 7 of the combat flags, and I could do that just because I would earn them back so quickly. All right, Confederates, high calibers, dreadnoughts, all these things would earn me all these flags that I would use. It was great. So getting yourself a high tier premium, or if you already have one, definitely try and make use of it to make credits. Missouri, if you had it from back in the day, you're going to be earning 10% more yet next patch, which will be really nice. And nowhere near enough to keep up with the signal usage. Let's be honest here. It's pretty much impossible to keep up with millions of credits burned on a few flags, right? Hopefully they end up changing that and making the game a little more player focused again, instead of pay to win focused and money focused. But I don't really have much hope in that happening personally. So we'll just have to make do, I suppose, with less signals. As you can see, the dispersion can work sometimes pretty nicely, and we finally make use of our radar in a productive way. And that's 15 minutes into this match, and it's basically over anyway. I really don't think Missouri is overpowered at all because of this radar, generally just because it's difficult to make use of without killing yourself. All right, in-game, of course. YouTube algorithm, don't demonetize me. That was a poor choice of words. So with a match like this, you can expect to earn 1.6, 1.7 million credits, at least currently. We'd get 10% more out of the new combat mission, but that was a pretty solid game out of the Missouri. We did do most of our damage to battleships, and that's why our base XP is a little lower than you might consider, but 2,000 base XP is a pretty good game, all things considered. We did some healing, we did some tanking, we kind of did our job this game, and we pulled out a win. Of course, winning gives you a massive bonus to credits, but here we can really see the change. All of those 100,000 credits would have been in our earned or received category, and then all the modifiers would have added to that effect. And that is why we're getting even more percentage on this combat mission, because of games like this, where you used to be able to stack your flags and get all that extra income. Now you really can't, so they do need to kind of make up for that. As a bit of a weird change, because of that, if you don't run all those modifiers on your Missouri, it might actually make more money than it did before. So maybe that's a good thing. You don't have to have the modifiers to make even more credits than you used to. I don't know. Personally, I'd rather just it be like it used to be. More consistent and what we paid for, right? So this is the build that I was running on the Missouri. I really don't know if this is the right build for this ship, but it's one that I've been using on some of my American battleships, getting this hybrid secondary build. Even though these don't have the improved dispersion like Ohio, Georgia, Massachusetts do, maybe we get a little extra damage out of them. I know you probably saw my Monty video where we ran a bit of a hybrid build and carried things out near the end of the game. We're primarily focused on our main guns though, so if you wanted to get more use out of your main guns, you could definitely run more of a reasonable concealment build. I think that is probably what most people should go for. I'm just kind of weird and I like experimenting with secondaries, as many of you know. Maybe even a build like that is a little bit more normal for everyone, right? Of course, once subs enter the game, you'll probably want to take some of these skills because they just get a little bit better, more useful. You can use them against subs and carriers, more likely to get some value out of those points invested. Now onto the equipment that I've used. It is pretty standard, I think. Running the accuracy mod, you can run reload if you want to, but I think having more accurate guns is a little more valuable. More shells on target, that kind of thing. Concealment, I'm running rudder because I've been seemingly doing a little bit better with constantly being on the move. If you tend to play around islands more like I did earlier in that match, I think probably damage control system or even prop mod is a little bit better, but they all work quite well. And this is why the American battleships can get away with running a bit of a hybrid secondary build, because there's no accuracy mod for your main guns in this slot. That's the reason why. And I think secondaries is pretty good, even if you don't run the full build for secondaries, the 7 points on your commander. But artillery plotting room mod 1 or turret traverse, always useful things. If you have the coal for it, surveillance radar mod does get your radar up to that 42-second duration. You know, that's enough for you to get 2 salvos and for your team to hopefully get a few in as well. And then main armaments mod 1. Pretty standard. That's Missouri. Hopefully, if you have it from back in the day, you're going to enjoy that extra credit income that, I guess, brings it back to what it used to be, right? Hopefully that's the case. Kind of odd that Wargaming has struggled so much with the math on this one that they know all the calculations for. Seems odd, but at least they're fixing it now. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.